Well, hello everybody. I bet you weren't expecting this. So, unfortunately, I don't have the very beginning of this recording. My recording shot with the sketch and the black and white sketch, but alas, I have this for you. So, I've recorded this audio twice now, and I had a lot of ums and ahs, so I'm going to do my best to avoid that as much as possible. I'm here to talk about this piece and a little bit about my process and how I make these sort of things. So, for context, this is my first attack for Art Fight, and the creator of this character is named Amira. Almost messed that up. The creator's name is Amira, but the character's name is Enki. Might be wrong. Alas, I'll have a little JPEG of Enki and what their character normally looks like, made by them. But yeah, the design stood out to me so much that I was like, yeah, I want to recreate this piece. I want the challenge of like drawing so many bones and so many like little decay little bits and everything. So I really wanted to do that. But let's get back to talking about at least my process because I had a couple people ask me, how do you do this? And I figured it was probably time to address it a little bit. So this is a digital painting, and what I mean by that is I take the time to make the piece look as though I painted it. I make it look like I painted it with either acrylic paint or oil paint. I don't go as far as to like add a canvas texture on top of it. It's a lot more detail. The reason why I do this is because I've was taught this way, believe it or not. When I was watching YouTube videos back in the day and I would follow these artists and how they did their like paintings and everything like that, I found a lot of artists that did speed paint videos that were very, very painterly. A lot of the artists that I would watch were either professional concept artists and people who like actually have to make their stuff look good or a lot of YouTubers back in the day who would do like fan art pieces. So I learned very quickly that, at least during that time when it was really popular, to paint painterly with digital pieces. Now, there's nothing wrong with people who don't paint painterly. It takes a lot of time to learn how to paint painterly, and there's nothing wrong with drawing and just creating by like having line art or flat colors or anything like that. Because honestly, at the end of the day, each has their pros and cons. So for my process, I start off with a black and white sketch. Then I'll have these like shaded values, still black and white, so like your darkest darks and your lightest of lights to create like a 3D form in the space. But I should address this real quick. I had such a tough time creating the bones in this piece that I pulled up two pictures of like vertebrae and sailfish bones and that sort of thing, because I just couldn't get it in my head. Like the bone structure is very similar yet very, very different, and how Amira combined the two was absolutely wild to me. So I was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's do this the right way. But back to how I make these things. So I start off in black and white and I add all the values in. Then I'll take a bunch of layers and add color back. How I do this is through gradient overlays. Sometimes it's clipping mask, or I mean, most of the time it's a clipping mask. Or it could be a specific type of layer, like a overlay layer or a or a darken layer, multiply layer. It just depends on the piece. And then after I have the color back, I do a detail pass. So for most of my pieces, I do multiple detailing passes. So right now, what you're seeing on screen is my first detailing pass, where I'm being very specific of how the form should look and how the bones work and how I want the values to look. Okay, hopefully you can hear me. I am at a stopping point for this piece here. I've got a little bit more work to do, a little bit more cleanup, but I wanted to talk about this from a artist perspective, because I'll see these types of pieces, like a digital painting like this. Let me add a new layer here, and I'll have a lot of people, we'll use green, I'll have a lot of people go, well, this would be, like, done. There's nothing else to add to this, yada yada. Um, and for some artists, that is absolutely acceptable and totally fine. However, I'm going for a much more dramatic type piece with this, and the background is very, very simple. I've got just a basic gradient in the background. And as for details and everything, it's still a little muddy, and I want to show what I mean by that. So here's what we're going to do as a pro tip, everybody. If you want to learn how to digital paint, there's so many other artists out there to like actually follow and look into, but I'll give you a little advice here if you want to listen. Anyway, so we're going to make this black and white. So why did I do this is because you can see plainly that the brightest light is on this ear right here, right? It's right there, and it's this color, right? That is our highlight. You can also see it down here. Hold on. Go back to red again. You can also see it here and here. All right, those are your brightest highlights. Now, that's not a bad thing by any means. However, what becomes the problem is that I want those highlights to also appear here and here, right? Maybe on the fingertips as well, because I don't want the focus to be anywhere else from, let's use blue, this main area. I want that to be the focus, not all over the place. So there's a couple ways to fix that. If we keep it black and white for now, I can just push and pull the background a little bit. Okay, so darken these a little bit, push them back, right. And then down here, I can push these back a bit too, around. Then I can create some distance, right? Very, very basic. And how to push this even further, right? So what I'm doing right now is adding some atmospheric perspective. That is the actual term for our, what I'm doing. Now, ideally you want to do this in color, but I'm showing it in black and white because I can easily show it in black and white. Atmospheric perspective is just kind of adding the background color back to your piece, because that way it shows what is forward in the piece and what is backwards, right? So this part is coming towards you, this part is going back and away from you. This is how you get your like darkest shadows, which is right here. That is my darkest shadow besides this one down here, right? So you notice that they're the same color. That is entirely on purpose. But you can push this even further, right? So I could add a bit more of this darkest shadow up on the rib cage. I can even add it a bit here. But if this part up here is going backwards into space, I want these horns to also go backward into space as well. So I don't want it to be as dramatic as the other one, but I do want it to be somewhat dramatic, especially since this is going to be an underwater piece. I want a little bit back. And this is really, really easy to do in black and white. In color, it becomes a little bit more complicated, but I'll show you guys how to do that. you'll be able to see it when I do it. But look at that. So suddenly, I've got a piece that is a lot more dramatic than what it was. And it's just adding like a little bit here and there and doing a bit more detail. So that's where we're headed next. I could easily just stop here and call it a day and maybe like add a little bit of a background, but I want to push this piece to the next level. I know that there's a lot more detail that I can add from the skull alone. I want texture in the bones. I want this to actually feel like hair. And there's a lot of gold pieces that this character has that I have not added yet. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to do another round of detailing throughout the entire piece and making sure that it gets that atmospheric perspective that I'm looking for. Alright? So I just wanted to talk about it a little bit, just to talk about where my head's at, so that you guys can understand. Alrighty, shall we continue? So for this final bit, I'll come back and talk a bit about what I'm doing. What you're seeing here is the last bits of that first detailing pass, and I'm about to get into the second detailing pass that I did for this piece. I only did about 2 detailing passes for this piece because I wanted to get this out. I probably could have spent a lot more time on really refining the details, making sure that the fish fins look like fish fins versus the bones that they're connected to, and like having a little bit decay there. But alas, we ended up with this piece and where it's at currently. So anyway, I really enjoy doing a lot of detailing passes and making sure that the pieces look very detailed and very specific, having the materials look like the materials that they're supposed to look like. And that takes a lot of time, energy, and effort to do. It is not an easy thing to do. But yeah, that's my process. So I do a sketch, black and white, and I turn it into color. From color, I'll do a first detailing pass, and then most of the time I'll do a second or third detailing pass. And once all that's done, I finish up and I sign the piece. With this piece, you see that I have the background blank for now. I actually do the background last for this piece. Sometimes it can be a lot easier to do it this way, other times it can be very difficult. It just depends what the background is. For underwater pieces specifically, it can be a lot easier to do the background last because you have to deal with that atmospheric perspective. And what I mean by atmospheric perspective is basically in water or in air, the further something is away from you, the more blue it'll become, or like the more faded it will become. It depends if it's like raining or whatever. So think of mountains when you're driving and you'll see like the blue mountains in the distance, and if it's closer to you it'll be like more browns or greens because it's covered in trees. But if it's further away from you it'll actually like appear blue. That's called atmospheric perspective, and it still happens underwater too. So that's why you see me like really push and pull what's in focus and what's not in focus on this piece. So if something is further away from the viewer, it is definitely in like that bluish range. If it's closer to the viewer and how you perceive it as the person looking at the piece, then it's more in color and it's more detailed. Anyways, while we wrap up here for the end of this first attack for this year, I just wanted to say thank you for watching. I really do appreciate these things, and I do want to share my art process with people and really get into the art community a lot more than I currently am. But you'll have to forgive me, this is my morning voice. I just had a cup of tea and I just kind of woke up, so I'm editing this as the afternoon comes before I have to go back to my next job, so thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know, and stay tuned for the next attack. We'll see if I record it or not.